My name is Leilani Darwin. I'm the CEO of First Nations Collective Consulting. I am a Nunaka Quandamooka woman from my mum's side of the family, and I also come from a family of immigrants from Burma on my dad's side. A big part of how I've come to do what I do has been my journey of healing. And through a lot of the trauma and experiences that I had and losses as a young person, found myself in a situation of having attempted suicide and having mental illness. When I was able to, in my early 20s after my third attempt, finally find a space that I could heal and move forward, it was very much based on my connection to Aboriginal people. And given that my family were from the stolen generation, I couldn't do that necessarily directly through blood relations, but I had that sense of connection and family with other Aboriginal people, and it was what I had been missing from me since the loss of my mother and my grandmother and the splitting of our family. And so it kind of started to shape me then, but it wasn't until even a little bit later in my career where different opportunities came to me, and I refer to it as the ancestors opened doors for me, and I chose to walk through them rather than to be afraid, and that's how I got here. Oh, for me, it's for my people. When I think about it from a psychological perspective, as someone who has depression, anxiety and deals with suicidality regularly, my biggest driver and passion is for my loved ones and people who are closest to my heart, and for First Nations people to maybe potentially not have to deal with all of the things that my family and other generations have before us and that I've dealt with in growing up, because we want and need our young ones who are going to be our future leaders to thrive and to feel connected, to feel as one in everything that they're doing, but also to potentially not have to experience what we do. Are we a long way from getting there? Yes. But for me, that is the biggest motivator. Look, it's quite interesting for me because I think personally the energies of being around other First Nations people is incredibly re-energising for me, and reminds me to reprioritise and refocus on what are collective efforts and collective drive and passion and just a beautiful generosity of sharing and caring about each other, even though, we don't live right next door to each other, but that international reach is real. And I think having the opportunity to give something back to community and to people more broadly, a free webinar is just that. When we talk about reciprocity and we talk about what we do to give back, not everyone can, has the means or, technology and things like that. There's a lot of things that are barriers to people being able to get these kind of insights and wisdom. So it was great that we were able to say, well, actually, this is what we're doing, and this is about reciprocity, and this is giving back. So there's no cost involved. My biggest hope, I think, there's lots of hopes, and it's good that we have hope, because if we didn't, it would make what we're doing even more challenging than what it already is. I want to continue to see a shift in the systems and the structures and the policies of which we work, live, breathe, play, whatever you want to say, actually acknowledge the injustices, the issues and concerns that we have, and in fact gain more from what is incredible strength, intelligence and ways of working, to see that be something that could be shared collectively and globally, instead of constantly looking at the deficits and the burdens and the things that aren't working. How about we just use what we as First Nations people have to to start to address these issues, because wouldn't society more broadly benefit from that? Look, you know, I've got a different set of experiences, and I think there's two things here. And we talk about this continuum of healing and how we kind of live. And so I was a young person. My first attempt was 13 years of age, when all the stuff that I had dealt with as a younger person, and losing my mum to suicide and all the other trauma caught up with me. And that continued until my younger years. And then I had many years of recovery. And that, I think, is an important thing to know, that even when you're potentially in the spaces and you're thinking, this is not going to get any better for me, it can. I think be realistic about that too, is that life happens. So we're always on this, I always call it a good roller coaster journey of life. Things up and down, stresses up and down. Where I found myself in the past 10 years or so is back in a space where I have depression and now anxiety, which is unfortunately continuing to progressively get worse, and the suicidality that I deal with. And even in that, I think, you know, I remember back to having been in a good healing and solid space, but it's okay also that I'm back here again. And it's a journey, and it's one that, you know, when it peaks, that I feel it's its most unbearableness, and I couldn't possibly cope, and I couldn't continue learning to sit with that peak of despair and pain, and what your head basically tells you is not true. You can come through the other side of that and be sitting in a much better space. So my message is that even when you have these experiences and when these things happen, to know that that's not necessarily going to continue for the rest of your life. One of the strengths, and actually what I realised a bit later in life, was actually my safe place. So by the time, you know, my mum and siblings had grown up, and I was then living with a mother who had severe mental illness and suicide attempts, and, you know, we were poor, all of the things. But we had moments in time when we went and spent time at my grandmother's place as cousins and things like that, and it was just amazing. It was food galore, it was fun, it was being spoilt. But it was the sense of connection that really helped me, you know, with my family and that at the time. So when that finished, and I also knew, so it's a quite interesting concept. My nan, bless her, always used to say to my cousins that I was different. And so my sisters and I have different biological fathers but the same mother. And literally, like my younger sister, who passed away 10 years ago from suicide, her dad was Italian and immigrants. You know, his mum came over. And my older sister's dad was German, and my dad was French Indian background. I was the only one out of all the kids who had dark skin. And now that, in knowing what I do, I realise that when she used to tell them I was special and stuff like that, and to be mindful for me, what she was doing was trying to protect me because I looked different and I had dark skin. And that became tough when she was gone, because we didn't have that matriarch. We didn't have that person that kept us together. And as we got older, and me in particular, I used to call myself the black sheep of the family, because I called out things that were wrong. I called out injustices. And when I started to learn and was exposed to other people, you know, and other Indigenous people, I was like, actually, this isn't normal. But when I had the opportunities to connect with and become family with my mob, like I always, with mob, I felt most comfortable. I felt most myself. I'm an introvert by nature, despite what you might see me doing in the public realm. And so that, even to the point, there's an intricacy in this that I think is quite powerful. One family group in particular, you know, I lost my best friend, and she was part of that family group, and I knew other people before she became, you know, my dear friend. And we went back home to their country, you know, for ashes and all that kind of stuff. And when I got to this space, I spoke to her mother, who I was actually friends with before her, and I was like, why do I have these feelings of being home and safe and protected? And she said, because you're basically one of us. And it's the power in that, as First Nations people, that collectivity of not being on your own, that helped me the most to, at the times when I felt most isolated, most alone in the world, reminded me that I wasn't. It didn't just remind me, but it showed me, and I felt it. That connection to country is really powerful. And when you come from someone who only in the past few years has found out where my mob are from, how do you get that? And I don't know whether that is the way that the ancestors in the world really kind of allowed me to have those connections through other family groups and relationships that I had. It's incredibly important. In fact, in Australia some time ago, and this goes back to some learnings that I'd had when I used to work in corrections with our mob, there has been a study that has been conducted in Australia with mob who have been incarcerated, who were very mentally unwell, where what they trialled was to, because they couldn't go back to country, was to actually bring a soil from their country and their land, and have it in a box. And so when they were unwell, they could put their hands through it, they could put their feet through it, they could have that kind of connection. And that study, from my understanding, was found to be quite successful in helping to calm them and recenter them. And again goes to those, the difference in the westernised kind of models of we are part of the country and we're connected. So when we are well, the country is well. When the country is well, we are well. There are so many stories about things like that. Probably one of the messages that I wanted to share is that I really understand and appreciate that it can be quite challenging, not just in a personal way, but particularly in family groups, to put yourself and to put them in a vulnerable position to talk about things that happened that weren't good. So it's important to stay safe in doing so. And I know that some people I've met along the way who have had these experiences, whose family have directly said to them, we do not support you doing this, that's okay. I think there's other ways, just know that there's other ways that you can potentially contribute still and be a part of the change. And then to those people who I know, like myself, who might, maybe go against the grain, probably what I wanted to say is to each and every person out there who fights, who don't necessarily have the support and backing around them, to those who get up and stand up, thank you. It's really not an easy thing to do, and there's so much complexity behind it. And I think particularly when you yourself are dealing with your own mental illnesses and the ebbs and flows of that, plus life's challenges, plus family, plus community, the sense of obligation, responsibility and burden can sometimes be overwhelming. So I just probably wanted to say and encourage everyone that's doing that, keep going. You really are not alone. And at any time that you meet others who are doing the same thing as you, hold on to them tightly and dearly.